the very first show. Welcome to the very first show, an episode of the Hollar Back Show with myself, Dara, and MJ from the US. How you doing, MJ? Good? Cool.
I'm well.
Good. That's good to hear. So yeah, basically we're going to be doing a show each week. Obviously MJ's straight out of the USA, and obviously I'm from the UK. Now each week we're going to be reviewing music, cultural events, political news, with a unique perspective of the UK and the US. MJ is an award-winning journalist, and she's based in Washington, DC. So she's got that political kind of savvy down pat, right, girl?
Sure. Yeah, I do.
Excellent.
Whether I like it or not.
I know if I've got any political questions, I can just I'll just bring you in for the expertise, right? So yeah, obviously I'm Irish born. I'm an Irish born singer, songwriter, music producer, and author, and various other things as well, like keeping the roof above my head and all that. And this week, obviously, we're going to be talking about frontline heroes. This is basically our theme for this week, and we've got a very, very special guest, a frontline hero called Jonathan Godfrey, who, amongst many things, is a flight nurse, and he also survived a major crash in 2005 on the Eurochopter EC-135, which crashed into the Potomac River. Now, that's south of Washington. Jonathan wrote a book called Max Impact, and obviously that's been out for a few years now, but it's a fantastic read if you want to kind of get involved in that story. It was a miracle, basically, that he survived, believe you me. So we're going to be talking to him a little bit later. But we're going to I'll come back to the theme of heroes, aren't we, MJ?
Yes, sir. We sure are.
So heroes, basically, we have obviously, if people were tuning into your show with me last week, I was actually doing the artist routine, and we were talking about Stand Up for the Heroes, which is my current single that's actually out. We're looking at supporting the frontline heroes that have been keeping us afloat during this crazy pandemic time. And I'm running a campaign at the moment to British press and American press at the moment to get support on that. And MJ, you wanted to play the track, kind of remind people what it was about.
Sure did.
And then we'll come back. If we'll come back afterwards. We'll have a little natter about it. Before we do that, just to run through a couple of other things. So we've obviously got Jonathan coming in a little bit later, who's going to be talking about some amazing different topics. We've also got a band from Atlanta, one of my favorite cities actually in America. One of my favorite cities. I love Atlanta. It's a groovy little place. And we've got a great band called the Cranberry Merchants, who have got a couple of new records out that I really like. It's got a little B-52s edge. It's got that kind of Athens kind of tip happening, and really experimental. I think you're going to love that. And then obviously then we're going to do whatever else we want to do. Hey, within that hour, we've got an hour basically to fit all this in. So what do you want to do now, MJ? Do you want to play the video, or do you want to have a little natter about it?
I'd like to just go right into the video, if that's good.
Okay, cool, excellent. So we're going to be watching Stand Up for the Heroes video. This is out at the moment, raising funds for the frontline workers.
Okay, here we go.
Right.
There we go.
Cool. We're unmuted. Okay, cool. I think we had a few issues there with the sound. I don't know if the sound was kind of working there. Some of the people over here were going, "We can't hear the video. What's going on?" So I don't know if people were asking, you know what I mean? But if they didn't, I'll tell you what I'm going to do quickly. I'm just going to play them a little bit of it live, just so they can get an idea of what it sounds like. So it's a little bit. We're going to get a little shot of it. We never planned this, did we? Stand up for the heroes. Stand up for all those who gave their tomorrows. Stand up for the heroes. Oh. I gotta tell you the way I'm feeling. I can't believe the things I'm seeing. The world is unsteady on its feet. Trying so hard, others close their eyes. Oh, women, hold back the time. We can stand up for the heroes. Stand up for all those who get their tomorrows. Stand up for the heroes. When it came to the call, the wind scared us all. Oh, ooh. I will never forget the faces falling in battle, but never lost to me. Never has been so much owed to you. That sacrifice can never be repaid. I will never forget the tears that are falling. Stand up for the heroes. Stand up for all those who gave their tomorrows. Stand up for the heroes. Oh.
Lovely.
Basically, if you couldn't hear it in the UK, the recording, then I just thought I'd better just fill it in just so you knew there wasn't wrong there, and it wasn't just kind of like random images of very cool people. There you go, MJ. So that's Stand Up for the Heroes. Kind of what's your take on the whole vibe, you know, in terms of, you know, are we doing enough to kind of support our frontline workers at the moment?
I just don't think there could ever be enough. You know, I think, for one, we don't know how, you know, exactly, because we've never had anything like this happen before. So, you know, when you're not prepared, and we're obviously as a world, as an earth, we're not prepared for this sort of thing, even though we had signs of it, that it could happen someday. I don't think until it truly happens in the capacity that it happened, we could possibly be prepared for that, you know? Yeah. So, and it, you know, our guests later that we'll be talking to, that, you know, it's in his situation, the same thing, you know, how can you be prepared for something like that to happen to you? And how does companies and society as a whole prepare for disasters like this if you've never actually had it like this, you know?
Yeah.
So it's just, yeah, I think, of course, I don't think that we do enough. And I think a lot of people, they just either don't know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
or they know that something needs done and then turn the whole blind eye because it's easier to look away than it is to face something.
Yeah.
So
what do you feel is the things that we will learn from this event? What do you think the big kind of takeaways, if you like, are going to be for just for everyday people? What do you think will be the big changes, the big kind of the growth, if you like, of kind of like, you know, human consciousness?
You know, sadly, for me, it's hard to really what I think should happen. Well, in a perfect world for me, I would like to see people learn balance, because so many people are either totally to one side or the other. You have people who are like wearing masks, which is reasonable in my opinion, and you have people who are not, which is reasonable in my opinion, depending on what your reason is. Except for on each side, you have people making fun of those who are not wearing it or those who are, and they go at each other like it's the mask Super Bowl.
Yeah, right.
You know, and it's the same with politics and anything. So I kind of feel like if this doesn't unite people and teach balance, because as none of us know, like whether none of us know what this truly is, and none of us know where it's going really. But everybody, for whatever reason, thinks they know the best, and they're dividing themselves. And I would like to see it bring us together. But you know, if you go by social media and by chitter chatter that you see all over the internet, you would think it was highly divided. But if you get out on the street, for the most part, you see people working together, particularly here in the United States. So it's a really hard, it's hard to say what I think will come of it. I know that for myself as a personal evolution, I panicked in the very beginning. Like, I didn't say that, and a lot of people didn't pick up on it, but I did. And I was like, oh my gosh, I need to do this. And I didn't buy toilet paper.
I don't think you were alone in that kind of fear. I mean, I think most of us were kind of, I mean, like, you know, you know, you can only speak for yourself, but I know that I was tripping, you know, definitely kind of like cleaning door handles and doing real weird things, you know what I mean, that in the house that I wouldn't normally do. So yeah, I definitely feel that, you know, we were all kind of like, because it's the unexpected. We in our lifetime have never experienced anything quite like this before. So, you know, we were all unprepared, and everyone showed, this is the thing, is like, it was like being in a massive film where everybody had their own little script and they're all playing out their own little number. And some of it was kind of, you know, looking back on it, is actually comical, and some of it is tragic. Do you know what I'm saying? And it's you know, if Shakespeare could have written that, you know, I think he would have had a winner. He would have had a winner, wouldn't he? The great,
yes, he would have. The greatest pandemic tragedy.
Exactly. And it's terrifying. Okay, cool. It's so we got Libby coming in there with a vibe there. Obviously, yeah, please do send your questions in. So see, now you showed me something really interesting, because you took me shopping this week, which I thought was really kind of interesting. And I was in your sort of trolley, wasn't I, babe? I was in your trolley, kind of going around the supermarkets, and you know, just explain to me sort of like what the atmosphere is like when you're going out now and you're shopping and doing your everyday routine. How are people towards you? What's the kind of the general vibe?
Okay, so specifically, because when you as the United States, you get a very broad range of behavior depending on where you are. I'm in the DC area, in the DC greater DC metro area, and everyone. So on just about every store, there's a sign that says that you need to wear a mask as you enter, and gloves are not required, just masks in particular. Everybody is, if you want to get, I haven't seen anybody come in and say, I'm not going to wear a mask. I haven't seen anything like that. Everyone is pretty respectful of the rule. And, you know, even like myself, I do wear a mask when I go in. I'm not bothered to do so. It isn't something I'm offended by. I don't feel like my freedoms are being affected. I feel like I'm providing some sort of comfort, you know, even though I don't really feel like the mask is necessarily protecting me, especially if I start going like this and touching my face to adjust the sweaty thing and all of that.
You got that little cocktail.
Yeah,
your one, haven't you? you unscrew it and start sort of flipping a straw. I know if you were going around. I thought that's an original face mask, right?
It's military grade.
Now, the thing I noticed about, because obviously this show is really about American perspectives and British, if you like, perspectives, or European perspectives. I think, I noticed in the shops where you were taking me in your trolley that there was an array of abundance. It didn't look like there was any kind of shortage
really
going on there.
yeah.
I was actually quite tripped out about seeing mountains of kind of apples all stacked up in a lovely pyramid, and then and then you've got the wonderful oranges and the kiwis and the bananas, and it was just like, it looked like miles and miles of kind of aisle just with food in abundance. It was like you'd landed in the Garden of Eden, do you know what I mean? And and everyone was really polite, and there was hardly anyone sort of like crashing into each other with trolleys trying to beef each other out of the way, which is kind of the complete opposite over here. Do you know what I mean? Where I walk into sort of our Asda stores or wherever, and there's like one tomato kind of like looking really sad on its own, going, "Don't leave me here on my own," and it's it's really weird. Obviously, sort of like we had I think there was the only thing that was kind of, I was trying to get strawberries. Do you know what I'm saying? I was trying to get strawberries, and all that was left was like one sad little kind of plastic tub of strawberries that someone had punched their hole through with their finger and poked all these strawberries, and no one kind of wanted it because they think there's going to be corona all over these poor strawberries, and like, what did we do to deserve this? We were really beautiful strawberries. So that's the big difference. We've got like one aisle of kind of vegetables and stuff, whereas like you guys have just like, it's like, you've just, it really is like open Genesis, and there it is. It's America. Do you know what I mean? It's like, and on the 6th day, God said, "Let America have all the fruit."
Sorry. And I'm laughing, honestly, but it really, in some way, for me, it isn't. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Have you noticed any? What have been the things that you've noticed aren't happening in terms of sort of things that you'd normally kind of reach for? What's kind of missing at the moment on the shops?
It would appear to you that nothing is missing. However, our salad buffet is missing. So buffets are probably, I can't say this for sure, but just from the hubbub, they may not return. So being able to go to a restaurant that has a restaurant or a grocery store, because grocery stores here, they'll have a large island that's got all the salad fixings that you could think of, bacon bits, shredded carrots, all of it. And that used to be a place where I would often get my lunch. They'd give me a little scoop in there what I wanted, and then be on my way. That's one thing that will probably not return. But
why though? Why would that be?
Because of the handling of the food, because you have to reach in and use the handles and so close to the food. I think they would have to prove, and I don't know this because I'm not a professional in the food industry, but my guesstimate is that you'd have to make sure that you could prove a safe way of not cross-contaminating. And we got one here. Sin happens to be in Toledo.
Ramen noodles are surprisingly. Does that ring any bells with you? Ramen noodles.
Yes. So do you know the Chinese noodles, the little wiggly noodles that you can buy?
All of a sudden, Chinese noodles are not happening. What's going on there? There's conspiracy behind it. I'm telling you. Back on the noodles, mate. They're going to put the prices up. Believe me.
But ramen noodles are a staple for the impoverished communities throughout the United States, believe it or not, and in prisons. Prison, not that I've been there recently or at all. It's commonplace that they buy them from commissary, and so they're just, you can do tons of things with ramen noodles, and so and they're cheap. What is it like? Hey Sin, what is it like? 10 cents a package. Sin Mackley, the one who commented about the ramen noodles, ramen. Some people call it top ramen. So I don't know if that's what you guys may not have it. That's interesting. If you don't know what that is.
No, we do have. I've seen noodles before. It's not like we know. It's not like we're.
No,
in
this
that.
is different.
We're not living in the 15th century over here.
Well,
Oh my God, have you ever seen noodles?
pasta.
I've never heard of noodles. What are they? Oh, I don't know. I asked Francis Drake. He was over in China a little while ago. I think he brought a few things back, but we used it to floss our teeth with.
I'm talking about the ramen.
We've got noodles, babe. Do you know what I mean? But
not these noodles, I bet. No, I'm just kidding.
Not these noodles. I don't know.
I'm teasing. You probably do.
So okay, so we've got a lack of noodles basically. I'm sure you guys could sort the noodle supply out if you have to. But what about other things? Do you know what I mean? Like are they starting to ease kind of things out? A lockdown starting to ease off? Are they going to get the shops open now? Is there going to be a mad stampede for kind of, I mean, whatever the shop is that people love to go to?
That's a really good question because used to as a nation, we're usually as a nation, we're used to the president kind of giving the point, okay, everybody can do this now, or this region, you had a natural disaster, you can do this now. But
Sure.
What the president of the United States did was he said, okay, states, this is up to you. You make your decisions. I'm saying you can do this. Like, as far as federally, you get to decide how your states open up. So each governor of every state was given a very unique opportunity to prove themselves. So now each governor is deciding, okay, well, numbers on my state, they look at all the statistics in their state and they're making opening decisions based on that. Alabama, for example, they came completely wide open this last weekend, coincidentally on Memorial Day. So Gulf Shores, Alabama, and all these they just went wide open. People were on the beaches. You didn't see masks anywhere, according to the media. Now, I wasn't there, but from the video footage I saw, there was very few people wearing masks on the beach. Then masked news anchors were out there like, aren't you afraid? And the one was like, just get away from me.
Yeah.
Like, just go.
Get your mask before you talk to me.
Take it off, yeah.
Can't you see we're partying here? We've got things to get on with. We've got booze to drink and things to maybe a hassle with someone about a mask.
Of course, they picked this is an opinion time, which I very rarely give opinion time. Of course, they picked every goofball that they could find. Why aren't you wearing a mask? Because I'm going to let God sort it out, instead of just intelligently explaining, hey, it's the way I believe. I really feel as if I'm going to be okay. But no, they picked, God's going to let me sort it out while pitching back cocktails. So you had that. And so they it's the same thing that happens after tornadoes. They always pick somebody with the curlers still in and the roof ripped off their trailer. And it was panic in the trailer park, that sort of thing. They picked the dumbest people on the beach. But anyway, that was just my opinion. I
saw a video of Daytona Beach, and there was some like hip hop dudes basically in these kind of in a car, and he's got a like crowd around him, and it looked like a video, like a hip hop video, and he's throwing dollar bills out, so everyone's just going, I want a dollar bill. It was like, there was just dying.
That's not normal. Doesn't everybody do that?
I don't know. We wouldn't have got away with that over here. But that does bring me on to. So it brings me on to my first little topic with you, which is one rule for you, one rule for me. Now, what I mean by that is, recently over here we've had a bit of a scandal with a guy called Dominic Cummings, who is our advisor to Boris Johnson. Now, basically, he was one of the guys that wrote the whole lockdown kind of law of what you could and what you couldn't do. Right now, he has been found to actually have broken that on the 27th of March, where he drove 200 miles basically from his home in London to his parents' home up in Durham, and basically spent a bit of time there hanging out, doing his thing with his wife. And he came out with obviously once he got rumbled, he came out with a whole bag of excuses to say that, he'd been harassed by the press and this, that, and the other, and felt that it was safe and to get his family kind of out of town and out and away. But obviously, sort of like a lot of people now, whether that was right or wrong, a lot of people over here now are sort of kind of going, well, if they're not going to sort of adhere to those kind of rules, why should we? So what that has made is like a really hard time for the police to basically sort of endorse, whatever we're supposed to do. And right now we're in a complete confusion about what you know, what is kind of supposed and what isn't. You know what I'm saying? It's where they kind of could have had like a lot of a clearer kind of vibe. So as I say, so it does look to me that there seems to be one rule for us normal people, and sort of like, you know, the powers that be. Have you got any examples of that kind of thing happening in the States at all?
I do. We actually had, with all due respect to former President Obama, we had a moment where in the beginning, when everyone went on severe lockdown, you know, his wife was seen speaking and saying, you know, yeah, everybody needs to stay home. She was very, you know, very severe about it. And then come to find out that Obama had went golfing and doing the former president. And, you know, and this is, again, I'm very respectful of all of our presidents.
Of course.
So I mean this in a very respectful way. And then that was put up in front of the public, and it was picked apart in the beginning as well. You know, and then you do kind of wonder, well, you're telling us, you know, do you lead by example here? You know, so I do get that. I could probably give you so many, and I'm sure you could give me far many more examples of this. Some people would call it, hate this word, almost hypocrisy, but it does happen. Or is it hypocrisy? Do they just feel like the rules don't apply, and because their position is so important, do they feel as if they have to have these extra privileges? I mean, maybe that's what they think. I don't necessarily believe that that's the case myself as a commoner.
But, you've kind of had access to politicians in your career. Mm-hmm. You've interviewed some pretty big people. You know, are they kind of from another planet? Are they kind of, do they feel like it's, you know, we're sort of untouchable? Is there humbleness in sort of politicians that you come across that, you know, they want to?
Thank you for that question.
Come on,
Thank you for that. Hey, I'm a former journalist now. I guess I can go with this. Still occasionally I do have dealings with, you know, I'll try to make this brief. I'm trying to make this well thought out in a very quick moment as well.
Yeah, sure. It takes half an hour left of the show.
It takes a very special personality to be able to be a politician on the nation stage and the world stage. Mm-hmm. That comes with as a level of narcissism that you have to have. Some people have that narcissism in the right portions, mm-hmm. and some have it in abundance, like we have apples in the supermarket.
Sure, yeah.
A lot of times they have it in abundance. Okay, just like everything else in America, we go big or we go home.
Yeah, which works sometimes, but maybe not if you're trying to crack a nut. With a bulldozer. So you would suggest that they are kind of human and they have quite a humanistic vibe about them, or there is a kind of like you know, an alternative kind of just a power kind of, we'll just do whatever we can to kind of, you know, get our hands on the kind of the jewels, as it were.
Depending on what aspect I was working with politicians. For example, when you're working as a journalist, it's about the people. When they talk to you, it's about the people. Now, if you're working behind the scenes on like campaigns and all that, it's about winning.
Of course, yeah.
And that's about it. When it's behind the scenes, like, well, if we don't start kissing butt,
yeah,
then we're not gonna win. But you also got to take in consideration why it's so important to win. Some of the reason why it's so important to win is so they can do the things that they believe in. Some it's just about winning altogether. So that's the difference. I hope that helps. I hope that was a well-rounded answer.
Before we get our guest on, I'm just, you know, obviously you're coming up to election period of time. Is that going to happen this year, do you think, or are they going to put it back? Obviously not. If it was a normal time, you'd be getting rallies right now. Would that be start? Because I know it's November. Is that the vote cup hits in November?
Yes, November is, and you know, right now, because you know, COVID being the unknown frontier as far as any type of media or anything, right? You know, the conversations are all backdoor. They're all about winning, but it's how you use media to win, right? Or how you how are we going to get them to talk about something else besides COVID-19? So in that case, how do we tie our political strategy to COVID-19 in the media? And that's kind of where it's at right now. Political strategists are spread really thin at the moment, and they're stretching beyond their scope of profession. I mean, they don't even know what to do with this mess. So yeah.
Do you think there's a viable opposition to sort of the current administration?
There always is. There always is. It doesn't. Of course, President Donald Trump has a very special brand of opposition. When it comes to the opposing side, and vice versa. Those on his side, you've got extremists, a large group on each side, and you really hear from those people the most, right? The extremists on each side. You really don't hear about the people down the middle. And I'll tell you why you're not hearing from those people down the middle. It's because they're your people that are really busy right now, being your nurses, your key workers, and all of that. I mean, a lot of them, and I'm not saying that all, some of the extreme people are workers too, but you tend to hear more from those sides instead of the people who are really busy.
Right. Okay. I think we should get our first guest on. Can we get Jonathan in?
We sure can.
Yeah. Can we get him in?
Yeah.
We're going to get our first guest in, which is Jonathan Jeffrey. And as I said earlier, very amazing. Hello there, Jonathan. How are you doing there, sir? Are you okay? Can we hear you all right? Have we got the technical vibes to be able to hear Jonathan?
There we go.
There you go. Boom. It's very great. It's obviously great to sort of have you on the show. This is obviously our first show, so if it all goes wrong, just blame that person behind over there. It's nothing to do. Nothing to do with me. Well, obviously, I did give you a little introduction that you are a flight nurse, as it were, which means that you have been in the front line in this current sort of situation that we found ourselves in. If I go back before that, and then we'll come on to sort of what's been happening for you on a day-to-day basis. So you survived quite a major crash in 2005, which you wrote a book about called The Maximum Impact, or Max Impact. Are you cool to maybe give us a little bit of an insight into kind of like, a little bit of before, what was happening before that happened, and maybe run us through just the situation, and we talk about survivability as well within that framework, if that's all right.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Thanks for having me on the first show. That's pretty exciting. Back in 2005, I had been a nurse at that point for about 10 years. It was my dream job. I'd worked in the areas of critical care and trauma, and I felt like that the environment that was best suited to me was flying in a helicopter to go and bring patients either from a scene like a car wreck or an ATV collision or something like that to a trauma center, or if you were to get sick in a hospital out in the country and you needed to be brought to a higher level of care, then we would go ahead and transport as well. Yes. On January 10th, I'd been on the job for about 8 months at that point. And we flew a patient into Washington, D.C. It was about 11 o'clock at night. It was cold outside, as January in North America. And on the way home, I was sitting in the front of the aircraft. We made it about less than halfway home. We were just outside of Washington, D.C., and we impacted the water of the Potomac River at about 149 miles an hour. My two coworkers were tragically lost on impact. And for reasons that I can't even explain today, I survived the impact, was ejected from the helicopter, and woke up on the bottom of the Potomac River with 11 broken bones, unconscious. And I spent about 45 minutes before I was rescued by initially a boat and then by another medical helicopter that is serving the Maryland area, which is Maryland State Police Trooper 2, which oddly enough flew me back to the Washington Hospital Center where we had dropped off our patient earlier. The odd kind of situation is that that's where I had been a nurse before. I was familiar not only with the hospital, but the trauma bays. And so I made the transition both in the EMS environment and the hospital environment from being a provider where I'd taken care of patients for a very long time, and found myself as, the person laying on the stretcher, looking it up at a lot of other people.
Yeah, indeed. Just in terms of sort of like so you were in the water for how long? Were you floating in the water? Obviously, sort of like you'd submerged a little bit. Are you out of the chair? You've ejected? Was there an ejector kind of seat? How did that work? Did the helicopter break in on impact? How were you projected out far enough away from the wreckage and any other kind of material around the bridge? How do you think that occurred for you? Where was your position within the helicopter for that to be an occurrence?
Yeah, so I was sitting in the co-pilot seat, which in a helicopter, the pilot sits on the right-hand side with the controls, and I was sitting on the left side. When we impacted at a speed of nearly 150 miles an hour, the aircraft just disintegrated. I mean, It was not a whole lot of recognizable aircraft left. I was ejected, still strapped into my seat, in my seat belts, and wound up coming to rest right side up at the bottom of the river, which is about 8 foot deep and 38-degree water. I have no idea. I have no recollection of impact. I remember coming to, and at that point, I didn't realize my injuries. The only thing that I knew was that I was waking up somewhere, being suffocated. I couldn't breathe. Pretty much any human being's worst nightmare. I came up to the surface after freeing myself from the seat and kind of hobbled my way swimming to the tail of the aircraft, which miraculously came to settle on an underground hill near the main fuselage, and climbed up on there, where I waited for about 45 minutes until rescuers came. So that's really kind of the Cliff Notes version of those events.
And so 45 minutes, how far had you floated? Did you float downstream? But because obviously your location would have been center of impact, but you would have traveled a little bit, I would have thought. So making sort of the rescue a little bit harder to actually be able to locate exactly where you were. What was the distance between the crash site and where you actually ended up?
Yeah, the point of impact to the point where I came to rest in the seat at the bottom of the river was about 40 yards. And they found my seat later on. And so I don't know how long that is in meters, but then the swim back was to the tail of the aircraft took me some time. So 40 yards, middle of the night, 11 broken bones was not the most pleasant traveling.
Amazing. So 45 minutes. When they picked you up, obviously you're back into the hospital that you once worked at. How long was it before you sort of realized? I mean, were you conscious? Were you out of the picture? How long did it take for you to realize what had actually happened? And obviously you're in. Did the trauma kind of the event kick in kind of relatively quickly, or was it actually after you processed the event?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of stages when you come to kind of realizing what had gone on. Initially, I realized what had happened when I was standing on the tail. By the time that I was in the trauma bays, I was far more concerned about where my coworkers were, because I had no idea where they were at that point. But there was also, a couple of other stages that were pretty significant: post-traumatic stress, and then survivor's guilt. Once I realized that I was the only one, and that brings up a huge amount of emotions. As well as a kind of a tug of war when it's why me, and navigating kind of that new world that you live in once you've gone through a significantly traumatic event.
How long did it sort of take you to kind of get back into kind of functioning again? Obviously you're carrying this whole new event experience you've come through. How did you try to get back to some sort of like functioning life without that kind of like being, crippling your every moment?
The broken bones, the physical trauma. I was discharged from the hospital after a negotiation with the physicians and staff there because the Nikki's funeral, my paramedic, was going to be on the 6th day after the crash. So I was actually out of the hospital pretty early. Excuse me. The returning to work took about 13 months before I actually climbed back into a helicopter, which some people would say that maybe I was a little bit more insane to go and climb back in. But that was my choice. I wanted to, if I'm going to go out of this career, I want to choose the way that I'm going to go out.
Sure.
And, now we're at going on year 16 at this point, that I've continued flying in the Washington, D.C. area.
What was that like when you got back in the cockpit for the first time? And are you a sort of kind of person that can put kind of fear and past events to one side? When you're in the situation that it calls for you to be on your game. How was that? How long did it take for you to go? I'm on a special operation here, and I need to be sort of like properly focused. How did you do that? How did you manage to focus in on that?
Some people will go and say that that's what we're built for. If you're working in an emergency room, in a trauma bay, and certainly on a helicopter and an ambulance, is that is our mindset from the beginning. So actually, I went in late fall of 2005 and took the opportunity to go through Dunker training in Groton, Connecticut. And I wanted to be able to go and in a controlled environment, kind of learn those skills even better and overcome my fears.
Wow.
Nobody had convinced me to do that. It was not a pleasant experience. It was over a 2-day period. But I came away with a lot more confidence to kind of face my fears. Going beyond that, the first time that I climbed back in a helicopter was probably it was in the early part of 2006. So almost a full year later. And I simply, not coerced. I was told that I would have a job, whether I flew or not. And I just wanted to go for a test flight. So I climbed in and we just flew around the airport initially. And then subsequent flights just wound up being a little bit longer and a little bit longer until finally I said, I'm ready to go and go through a full orientation and return to doing what I love.
Amazing story. Now, you wrote a book about your experience as well. Libby's saying thank you for what you do, Jonathan. So you've got fans out there already, my friend.
Thanks.
So you wrote a book about it called Max Impact. How did that go? Did you get a good response on that? Were people, was there stuff in there that obviously I haven't had a chance to read the book, but was there things in there, do you think, that were reference points for other people that were going through traumatic experiences? Did you learn so much that you were able to create like a guideline for sort of other people who might be going through it, like a resource, if you like?
Towards the end of the book, there is, some of the basic highlights. When you look back on an event like that, we try to learn some lessons. And as far as the transport industry goes, and even to the common public and how they interact with their vehicles, there's a lot of safety measures right now. COVID, it's wearing a mask and stuff like that. Some of the simple things, wearing a helmet. We expect our kids when they're traveling 2-3 miles an hour to go and wear a helmet on a skateboard or a bicycle. Well, certainly when we get in a helicopter, we do the same thing. Seatbelts, whether it's in a car, in an ambulance, all of those things contributed to what I call survivability. If I had not done those things, or if I had not done them with particular vigilance, then I would not be sitting here today. I wouldn't have been able to go and return to flying and return to caring for, the patient population that I enjoy transporting.
So we're talking about survivability of kind of traumatic situations, and is it as simple as basically, buckling up and doing the right thing, or are there other things that people should be doing to kind of to make their journeys a little safer? Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, because obviously your colleagues were buckled up, so what do you think that you did that maybe other people who have been less fortunate might have done?
That's a broad question, and there are a lot of answers. So I'll try to narrow it down to a few things. In the last 15 years, I've been invited out to different transport programs, hospitals, and talk a little bit about that. Some of it is purely a mindset in that, is it important to you or is it not? Employers go and provide either a vehicle or a surrounding, and they give you tools and make a large investment. Do you utilize those, or do you kind of say, I'm immune, I don't need to? My argument would be that safety actually starts with me. And if you have that kind of an attitude, then you're going to go and seek out those things which are going to allow you to go home at the end of the day. If you have the mindset that you're above that or you don't need it, then probably you're kind of reducing your chances for survivability. That being said, it also probably makes me think that choosing an employer or who's going to be providing where you're going to be working should start when you are kind of filling out a resume somewhere and saying, do I really want to work for this organization?
I think
all of it. On the other side, there's a mental part of it, and that is another topic, and that's resilience. And that is, what do you have that's kind of sitting between your ears and that's down in your heart? Resilience is kind of like a muscle or a rubber band. In other words, it takes a little bit of work before you get in that moment to be prepared for the stresses in the environment. It's particularly stressful when you're an EMS, police, public service, and you're tested over and over and over. And you find yourself in that one instance that you really have to kind of dig deep. Well, I would say that rubber band, that muscle that you have internally that we call resilience, is it prepared? And so we have a little bit of a discussion with the other public service areas and use the miracle of surviving the initial impact, because I didn't prepare for that, and I didn't have a whole lot of control other than going and doing what I was supposed to and just out of my control. But the minute that you're past that, are you ready to go and kind of rise to the moment? And all of us, have some degree of resilience, hopefully, living life or going to and from work or dealing with family and world life stress.
So, resilience is something that's important for all of us, because we're all, every day we step out of our front doors, we're sort of, we're faced with, something or other that might be testing. We look to people like yourselves who are kind of constantly having your resilience tested. What would be like something that, you could give people like myself who, little kind of exercises to strengthen that resilience? Do you know what I mean? Even if it's just kind of getting into a car, what sort of things do you do that are sort of mental prep and just getting yourself like basically, flexed up for the job,
Yeah, it's going to sound a little bit overly simplified, but healthy habits and a healthy lifestyle are the first step. If you don't do that, then those who are not watching what they put into their body, it is going to make a big difference in their energy level, your ability to rest. Take time for yourself. Recognize when you're being overly stressed or when you're entering into a hyper stress period of life. And some of our best barometers are our spouses or our family members, and doing a little bit of a self-check. The second place is that if you walk into your workplace and you're in one of those kind of critical jobs, admit, I have a new baby at home, or somebody next door is going and building a garage onto their house, and I'm only getting about 4 hours of sleep at night. Something to go and just say, hey, have my back. Look out for me. Stay hydrated, Dara. You are doing an excellent job at, at going and practicing a little bit of self-care. Beyond that, I think that not only physical, but mental and spiritual. And, I think that there's a misconception. Let's talk about the other side of resilience. And that is when you're down on your luck, when kind of the crap has hit the fan and times are bad. I used to go and think that, the strong thing was to do was pull up your bootstraps on your own and just keep going on and, push forward. And the weak thing to do was to go and say, I'm having a crappy day. Or, even worse than that was to ever go and say, I need some help. The reality of it is that one of the bravest things that you can ever do and admit is go and say, I need help. Because that is a position of strength where it is personally a perceived weakness. Going and saying to your wife, your friends, your community that, I need a break, I need to reduce my stress level, or I need to change my personal habits. Asking for help is one of the strongest things and bravest things that anybody could ever do.
Do you think the atmosphere of kind of workplaces is changing as a result of people like yourself who've been through experiences like that, written books, laid a kind of legacy? Do you feel sort of that, there is more understanding? I mean, particularly over in the UK, we have a thing called stiff upper lip. And that stiff upper lip is basically, you got to be able to take a punch, basically, do you know what I mean? And not complain about it. But as we're sort of moving into the 21st century, that's becoming kind of a lot less kind of apparent. Like, my father's generation, do you know what I mean? You put up, do you know what I mean? And you got on with it. Do you feel, they obviously sort of created major milestones themselves, that generation, the John Wayne generation, if you like, of not really kind of like really expressing themselves. Do you feel that we're sort of moving into a better culture now where this resilience that you're talking about is coming from that kind of strength to be able to go, I need some support here. I'm having a bit of a hard time. Can you help me out? Do you know what I mean? Do you think we'll be stronger human beings as a result of that new resilience?
Oh, I think that there's undoubtedly a massive shift in culture, and I think that we're only seeing the beginning of it. I think that employers were certainly some of I think that we saw it as individuals first, and then employers went and followed behind. I think that it was not a resistance to it. It was a lack of knowledge and a lack of education that reduced the amount of tools that are out there. And absolutely, in the last 15, 20 years, there has been a significant shift. Now, I will say that I still think that there's a huge gap. I went to nursing school. In nursing school, it was never talked about that you would go and be exposed to trauma or rough situations day after day after day. And the reality in many careers, you don't realize that. I think that's probably been one of the biggest eye openers in COVID, the amount of isolation, the amount of stress, the reduced resources that we have. I wonder what life will look like once this is all done. Safety, survivability, resilience, and resources are all things that it's fortunately, I think that there's going to be a lot of positive things both in the workplace and in people's personal lives.
We're sort of, time is of the essence here. Obviously, we're kind of running kind of slightly. I don't know if we're allowed to kind of go over because we do have a special guest here. I wonder if we could maybe just get a little insight into, because we're talking about frontline heroes, and obviously we're lucky to have you on the show to really just back up, what the whole stand up for the heroes thing is. Can you give us a little insight into kind of like what's been your day-to-day kind of reality on the ground, doing what you're doing. What have you, if you're allowed to be able to tell us a little bit about what you've seen on the front lines? Do you know what I mean? I think people would be really interested in hearing in your experience of what's happening on the ground right now, and obviously what's been happening.
Yeah, I think that I will, instead of just speaking about my own experience, I think that when I talk about it, it is obvious that I'm not the only one. And so for the nurses, physicians, paramedics, respiratory therapists, the person who checks out your groceries at the end of the belt at the grocery store is, we're all exposing ourselves to.
Absolutely. And sorry, you're getting loads of fan mail here, basically saying how cool they think you are. But no, I'm totally, you know what, the Stand Up for the Heroes song is really about supporting everybody who has been in the game doing this. But I'm just interested in sort of like what's been happening with you. What's your story? What have you seen? Because you've played a major part in this whole scenario. So what's been your reality on a day-to-day kind of, waking kind of vibe? What's been going down?
There are still people who are dying from coronavirus out there, and they are requiring some of the most intense professionals and interventions to transport them between facilities and keep them alive. We're not out of the woods yet. I watch the trends just like everybody else. The job has gotten, exponentially more difficult. In the winter, it's cold and uncomfortable, and during the summer, it is hot and sweaty. And when you have to go and add, multiple layers of protective equipment, it makes the job even harder. The mental and clinical portion is probably staying somewhat the same, but the external requirements to us, you could ask MJ. I just come home in a much more exhausted way. Sure. I'm sure that is the same for everybody who's still going into the hospitals and serving the community that we live in.
When you're getting, because obviously normally you'd be called to kind of roadside kind of situations, or high impact kind of all places that people can't get to by kind of road or whatever. Has your role changed now? Are you picking up kind of like people kind of suffering from cardiac arrest due to COVID, or has your structure of kind of workload changed as a result of COVID?
Without going into too much specifics, one is I don't do any of the scene response. In other words, I don't go to car crashes anymore. And that's just because of the program that I work with. But the patients that we are transporting are sicker. And the respiratory demise, or even patients who are who may be sick and we just don't know what's wrong with them. If you can imagine walking into a room with somebody who just has a cough and you just sit there and wonder. It's the same mentality, that I've mentioned before, is that, our personality is that we see a burning building. There are people running out of that burning building, and the ones who are running towards it. That's kind of messed up in the normal thought process, but that's what we do every day. And
that's what makes you the frontline heroes that you are. I mean, I do my I don't mind saying that we've been through the COVID thing ourselves. My girlfriend runs a nursing home over here, and it was hitting the fan, Easter time. So I've sort of seen the stress that she was coming back with on a day-to-day, where she was coming back exhausted, in tears, because they were losing people on a day-to-day basis, and it was actually horrifying. It was like being in the front line. Just I was playing support, really. Do you know what I mean? Put down the guitars, man, and I was just basically washing clothes and at the helm, making sure that those guys kind of were getting fed, and her daughter also works there as well. So it was really, as I say, it was a very testing time, and I'm not saying that's not over, but it was definitely a period of time where you know, it was all hands to the deck, and certainly sort of like bonded us all up as a unit. Do you know what I mean? There's talk of a kind of a, you know, obviously relaxing of lockdown and various other kind of like, you know, situations happening. Do you feel that it's going to ease off? What's your prediction? Some people are saying there's going to be a second kind of wave kick in. Do you have any kind of insights into that at all?
Yes, I do think that, first of all, it's an almost impossible call as to whether to open up or not. You know, it's trying to go and read a crystal ball. Do you keep things closed down and watch people lose their livelihood and keep them locked up in their homes with kind of the isolation and removing the resources that they are normally having? Or do you risk the chance that people are going to gather and transmit this virus? It's impossible to tell. The one thing that I'm confident in saying is that I do think that COVID is just, you know, one of many. I think that we're going to find ourselves in these situations over and over and over again, just as viruses have progressed. You know, we've been practicing for this for almost 10 years at this point. We've already had emergency plans in place. And so I think it's, you know, unfortunately, I think that we're going, whether it's this, you know, particular virus strain that's going to go and spike again, or we're going to see something completely new in the next 6 months, year, or 2 years. You know, it's time for us to be prepared for the next wave of whatever comes along.
Excellent. And so, well, not excellent, but it's so obviously people are suggesting that there's going to be an adjustment to the way that we live. And I think we were talking, MJ and myself were talking earlier about, you know, everyone having in different states their own kind of responsibility of whether they open and whether they lock down or whether they re-lock down. And that seems to be something that's going to happen over here. Do you think that that's the only way that we could go about living a normal kind of like normal existence without killing the economy, by giving each individual states, like, you know, that power to open up and close when they sort of see fit?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that if you look worldwide, I mean, look at Japan. They were able to go and not have a lockdown, but have had a strong cultural adherence to wearing face masks in a densely populated area. In an area like Australia, or maybe even in the States, Texas, where you have vast distances between people, you know, I think the rules are going to be different, and the response is going to be different than what you would see in Washington, D.C. or New York City, where population density is completely different. I don't think that there is a one response fits all by any means. And I certainly don't have any desire to go and run for office and be that narcissist that gets to make those decisions by any means. I'll be happy to live in my
with all your trauma resilience and your survivability, you'd probably be able to get through that job quite easily, I would think. Do you know what I'm saying?
I don't know about that.
Cool, excellent. Well, we're sort of running a little bit kind of a shorter time now. I'm going to basically thank you so much for coming on. You've got a lot of fans out there, a lot of supporters. I know that you're interested also in maybe coming to Europe as well and doing a talk on, you know, the subjects that we've talked about, which is resilience to trauma and safety and survivability. So that'll be something that I guess you're going to be working on sort of within the next 18 months, and we'll probably get a chance to maybe come over, you know, bring your book over, and we get a chance to actually hear you sort of speak, you know, live and direct when this is all kind of like hopefully sort of blown over and we can actually gather together in sort of tribes again, as it were. Is that something that you kind of picture, obviously, kind of doing, you know, as I say, when the reality allows you?
Oh, certainly. I think that continuing to travel and speak, I have been able to go and speak in Rome a couple of years ago, but most of my travels to talk to groups have been in the United States at this point, and it's been extremely well received But to have a human being who can go and kind of deliver what was, otherwise maybe a human-less message, winds up bringing it a little bit closer to home.
I mean, I think that's we're all going to look forward to kind of meeting you when you come over, and I'm sure you'll have celebrity status. Do you know what I mean?
That's not necessary, but I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I want to say thank you so much. I hope that you've enjoyed me sort of giving you a little grill, considering that I had no real kind of like understanding of some of the topics that we were talking about. So I've got a bit more of an understanding. I'm definitely going to be putting my seatbelt on a lot more.
Good.
As part of this conversation, do you know what I mean? Not just getting in the car and forgetting about it. So I'm going to thank you so much for that. I've kind of promised there's a band called the Cranberry Merchants, and they're from Atlanta. They're a really cool little band. I wonder if we could kind of go out maybe with their track Quiescence, and we'll get a chance to maybe review it because we are running out of time at the moment. But I want to thank everybody for tuning into the first show. MJ, thank you so much for kind of allowing us to kind of, come on and do this with each, the whole vibe between us. And so hopefully I haven't sort of like hogged the kind of scene here too much. Do you know what I'm saying? We're going to have, hopefully sort of next week, we'll have some more cool music on, more guests that we can kind of grill and take to the wire so we can find out what makes them tick. That's what this is about. We're going to go out with the Cranberry Merchants, and we'll talk a little bit about them in next week's show. As I say, they're from Atlanta, phenomenal band, and we're going to play a song called Quiescence. Is that okay, MG?
Yes, sir.
Cool? Okay, thanks a lot, guys. Once again, thanks to everyone who tuned in. And this is the Cranberry Merchants and their cracking tune. Oh, actually, we're going to play Disturbing the Peace by Crank, which is their latest one, actually. But yeah, crank that on. It's a wicked little video. As I say, from Atlanta, B-52's country, REM country. And peace, love, and we'll see you again next week, yeah?
I hope I locked the door. Oh, what a long day. All I want is some peace and quiet.
Hey, it looks like that cowboy dude next door is home now. Joe, think he'd like to hear our new song?
Well, sure he would. He loves our music.
We make the whole house
spirits. They already know that it's coming to peace. I'm gonna call the cops! You're disturbing the peace! We'll get more complaints about that same address. Send some more squads over. Sound like cranberry merchants are out again.